It's a kind of vicious cycle, John. It's all the same. It's we are back to square one.
Despite nothing very much being achieved in the Moscow talks on Ukraine, the Secretary General of NATO, Mark Rutte, has been praising Donald Trump, saying he's the only individual who managed to break the deadlock in negotiations. And meanwhile, the Ukrainian Foreign Minister says the country's negotiators have been invited to the US for fresh talks in the near future. We can talk to Arseniy Yatseniuk, the former Prime Minister of Ukraine. Hello to you. Welcome back.
Good evening, John. Good evening. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for coming. So these talks in Moscow, they were described by the Kremlin as constructive, but they do seem to have achieved nothing. And was that not entirely predictable?
Well, it was completely predictable, and they are very constructive for Putin. Because it's a sham talks, it's a kind of smoke and screen talks. The very idea of Putin is to drag its feet and actually to play for time. Initially, Putin wanted first to postpone the sanctions, but thanks God, sanctions on Rosneft and this another Russian oil giant has been imposed by the Trump administration. Second one is to block Europeans' idea to use Russian sovereign assets as a collateral to provide a reparation loan. And the third one is actually to imitate these talks and to drive a wedge between the United States and the European Union. So it is really constructive for Putin, but it's a disaster. It's talks, and I'm just wondering what kind of take both Special Envoy Witkov and President's son-in-law Kushner got out of this miraculous trip to Moscow. And have you seen that Putin started with the long message about Moscow? So the idea was somehow to make love between the U.S. delegation and Moscow, and it was a kind of, a new type of flattery towards the U.S. Delegation from Putin.
Yeah, I mean, look, it was only a few weeks ago that President Trump was talking aloud about his suspicion that he was being strung along by Vladimir Putin. Now, again, after this, is it not something of a wonder that President Trump does not see this as more of the same, more of being strung along by Putin and the Kremlin?
Look, it's a kind of vicious cycle, John. It's all the same. We are back to square one. President Trump already indicated that Putin was tapping him along. Putin did the same in Anchorage in Alaska, but look, Putin is very cautious in actually praising President Trump and once again trying to buy the time and not to make President Trump more aggressive, not to push President Trump to impose new sanctions on Russia and to provide an additional security supplemental for Ukraine. So he is playing the hard ball, but this is a KGB style, so nothing new. I didn't expect anything out of these talks, and that's not the talks. It's a sham talks, and once again, this is the way how KGB usually conducts this special operation. So special operation is in the progress.
Yeah, I mean, it looks, doesn't it, like a charade. Now, meanwhile, leaders of Europe, friends of Ukraine, they're, as ever, keen to be kept in the conversation. What, though, is within the power of those European leaders? What action can they take now to try to force some progress?
That was another aim of this special KGB operation under the auspices of designated war criminal Putin, is actually to sideline both the European Union and NATO. It's still quite successful, but look, Europeans are adamant in trying to jump into these talks, and both Secretary Rutte, who has the ear of the President Trump, and a number of the EU leaders, they try to play the role. Here is my take. I believe that the most important issue right now is whether Europeans could manage to use Russian sovereign assets as a collateral to provide the loan for Ukraine.
Yes.
We are completely out of cash. And this would be a really visible and tangible result. So if they manage to deliver, this would give us another trump cards for President Trump. The second one is whether Europeans could really deliver on its promises to provide an additional ammo to Ukraine. Ukraine. So Europe has launched a number of military rearm programs, and but still they are lagging behind the schedule. So the second issue is whether Ukraine can get an additional ammo. The third issue is whether President Macron, who is right now in China, can both deliver a very strong message on behalf of the European Union to President Xi, and maybe he can get some kind of concessions. I have doubts about.
Yeah.
Over China's stance in this war. Because look, China is definitely an accomplice. China is definitely a back office to Putin. And Xi and China is very clear that they believe that Putin has to, that the war could be ended only in case if Russia reached its ultimate goal, and this is to eliminate so-called root causes of this war, and this is to eliminate the state of Ukraine.
Yeah, I mean, look, the access to those frozen Russian funds is absolutely crucial, isn't it? We're talking about, I don't know, something like 350 billion euros, and the European
there are different numbers, and
There are
that's another issue, John. You know, everyone is deliberating over different numbers,
Yeah.
from 140 billion euros to 300 billion euros. So what the hell is going on? Could someone tell the real number? How many Russian assets have been frozen?
I mean, that is a good point. You do see different numbers reported in different accounts of the state of play, but it is an awful lot of money. And the European Union leadership, the Commission, they want to get that money to underpin a loan to Ukraine, which could be so vitally important to Ukraine. It hasn't happened yet. Some in the European Union, Belgium in particular, which does hold a lot of this money, they want guarantees they won't be legally exposed. Now, from your contacts with the European Union, are you able to feel confident that that money will be released, that Belgium will accede to this plan?
Look, John, initially, Belgium had really legitimate concerns. So they asked for the risk sharing and for the burden sharing, and I fully share this take. But look, the European Commission already provided an appropriate language and the decisions that could cover these kind of risks. And as of now, the European Commission is floating an idea how to circumvent or how somehow to avoid the veto right of Hungary, which is the Trojan horse of Putin, and those who are not ready to support Ukraine. And we have only two options on the table. The first one is to use these assets as a collateral and to provide the loan to Ukraine and actually to provide the lifeline to Ukraine. How to prosecute the war? There is no other way to prosecute the war. If you don't have cash, so you already lost the war. Plan B is to ask EU member states to provide some kind of new vehicle using their taxpayers' money to grant another loan to Ukraine, which is not realistic right now. And there is no other plan. So it means that the European Union has to deliver on its promise and has to fight like hell in order to use these Russian assets as a collateral and to provide Ukraine a new loan.
Okay, let me just ask you finally about corruption in UK. You're looking for a substantial flow of funds, built on these Russian frozen assets. But is corruption a worry? Because, I mean, the president, Zelensky, has lost 2 cabinet ministers, his chief of staff, over a corruption case. How confident can anyone be that as and when that money arrives in Ukraine, it won't be targeted by corruption?
Look, it is completely unacceptable and disgusting to commit any kind of corruption crimes and to be in any kind of graft schemes in the country that it's a state of war. But on the flip side, I can tell you for sure that even despite the fact that Ukraine is at the state of war, we are fighting both against the Russian aggression and we are fighting against the corruption. It is an completely unprecedented, that anti-corruption agencies that was established by my government started to prosecute high-profile Ukrainian officials. And the president has no authority to stop these kind of investigation. And the president has decided to lead these anti-corruption efforts. So even in times of war, we are fighting against corruption. And we do have an independence body who have a very strong powers to go after everyone who is the part of the corruption scheme.
All right. For now, Arseniy Yatseniuk, former Prime Minister of Ukraine, thank you for joining me on the programme.